Good Halloween and trick and treat. This one is called One Treat Too Many. This is the story of Billy Keating, who died of a surfeit of trick and treating. He ventured out one Halloween, since when the child has not been seen. October nights can turn quite chilly, and wanting to protect her Billy, his mother, with the best intent, fed him up before he went. Burger, sausage, chips and peas, and toffee pudding, if you please. Then, erring on the side of caution, she served him up another portion. Then, with vampire costume on, a bargain brought from Amazon, and fangs to make the things complete, he ventured out into the street. His neighbours were a kindly lot, and every one of them had got a bag of treats beside the door. The street went up to 64. He got Milky Ways and Snicker bars, fun-sized bounties, full-size Mars. Then Mrs. Jones at 36 gave him a double pack of Twix. Several gave him wagon wheels and other supermarket deals. Billy never could resist toffee-flavoured buttercakes. And giving not a single thought, he swallowed far more than he ought. So when he got to 48, he could barely squeeze out through the gate. And suddenly he felt uneasy. His head was light, his tummy queasy. Then, puffed up like a big balloon, he floated off towards the moon. His parents bought a telescope. And every night they watch in hope that somewhere in the starry sky they'll spot their Billy floating by. Sorry to remind you of this, but we're only 6 weeks after Christmas. There's a couple of contrasting ones. One is my own cynical take on it, which is called Once a Year, thank God. Christmas comes but once a year, thank God for that, I say. This year I think I'll hibernate, emerge on New Year's Day. I can't quite put my finger on the reason for my dread, but when the 25th arrives, I think I'll stay in bed. It's not the turkey, hot and cold, that fills me full of gloom. It's not the Queen's speech I abhor, nor yet the Virgin's womb. I'll sing some carols if I must. I'll sing with all my might. But I won't use shops at Startland the day after Guy Fawkes night. I'll pull a cracker if I'm pushed and read out silly mottos. But boycott those department stores with cardboard Santa's grottos. I'll ooh and ah with all the rest when the Christmas pud's ignited. As I open my third pair of socks, I'll try to look excited. I'll graciously accept CDs, although I yearn for vinyl. Then I'll sneak up to the bedroom to watch the countdown final. Then back downstairs to be polite to once-a-year relations and get my annual thrashing on the grandchildren's playstations. We'll watch countless Christmas specials and White Christmas yet again. But when the sound of music comes, I start to go insane. Oh, I know it's a lovely story, and I know it's a mortal sin. But I find myself hoping that one year I'll allow the Nazis to win. Now at last it's over and Boxing Day's arrived. The visitors have all gone home and once more I've survived. The shops have all reopened, so it's time to stretch my legs and toddle down to Tesco's to get the Easter eggs. Slightly less well then, slightly sad perhaps. It is, yeah. It's called Dear Mr. Claus. Dear Santa, I'm writing you this letter more in hope you understand than in anticipation. My best friend Katie Jane and worst friend Millie too both tell me it's a waste of time because there's no such thing as you. But Mummy says, sure there is. And anyway, we saw you at John Lewis by the station. And I know you must exist, because when I wrote last year it didn't come back address unknown. So I hope you're keeping well, for you must be very old, and in Lapland where you live I've heard it can be very cold. I'm keeping quite well, thank you. And Mummy says you'll be amazed to see how much I've grown. The trouble is, I'm not too sure if I've been good enough for you to call on me this year. You see, just before the summer, on the 25th of May, Daddy left a note to us to say he'd gone away. And although I can't think what I did, it must be something bad for Daddy not to want me here. Mummy says it's not my fault he went away and that they both still love me like before. And Daddy isn't living far away, so I can see him every other Saturday. And stay the whole weekend as well, and play with his new partner's daughter, Eleanor. What is a partner, by the way? As far as I can see, it's just another wife, but only 23. And another thing I'm finding quite confusing too. Although she's an adult, they told me I can call her Sue. I mean, I don't call Mummy Angela. Oh, but sorry, Santa, you've no time to hear all this from me. So if your secretary helper hasn't got fed up with this and thrown it in recycling yet, I've made a list of things that I believe I might deserve to bring me on Christmas Eve. Where I've mentioned prices, this is only as a guide. As I know these days they're often cheaper on the net. I've used the Argos catalogue to help me with my search, as I think you'll find these things easier to find. I'm into dressing up now, and would like a party dress. And Daddy always tells me I'm his very own princess. There's one for $14.99 on page 1653. I'd quite like, if you don't mind. I'm really good at painting now. And guess what? Last week, Mrs. Fisher put my painting on the wall. It was one of Mummy and Daddy, and I was in it too. But there wasn't room to put in Eleanor and Sue. There's a lot of art equipment there, and prices vary greatly, so you needn't spend a lot on it at all. There's a set in there of beads and string for making your own necklace designed the way you'd like. I'd really love to have a DVD they've made about my favourite programme on TV. Now, I might be asking too much here, because I know they're quite expensive, but I'd really love to have a bike. Well, Santa, though there's much more I'd like, Mummy says I must leave your other children's presents in your sack. So I'll close now, but there's one more thing I have to say. I would gladly give all my other presents on my list away for just one special gift. I want to open one big box on Christmas Day and find you've sent my Daddy back. Well, thank you so much for turning out in such numbers on a pretty miserable November day. I would have felt a bit stupid sitting here if you hadn't. I'm going to leave you on a serious note. We're just 2 days away now from Remembrance Sunday. And a few years ago I was doing my shopping one Sunday and I went into the cafeteria afterwards with my paper and a cup of coffee. And I suddenly became aware of this eerie silence. God, what's that? And I realised, of course, that the 2-minute silence had begun, and I hadn't heard the announcement. And before I left the cafeteria, I jotted down the first couple of lines of this one, which is called, not much originality, The 11th Hour. I was shopping in Sainsbury's on Sunday when the 2-minute silence began, to remember the dead of a century's wars, that unique invention of man. I covertly looked around me at the shoppers, all silent and still, and the checkout assistant with head bowed in front of her idle till. And I marvelled at just how quiet it was, when just a few moments before, the place was alive with a hubbub of sounds that abound in a crowded store. And as I studied their faces, some lowered, some staring ahead, I wondered just what they were thinking in this mark of respect for the dead. Some young ones perhaps were impatient to get on with their shopping again. It was so long ago that it happened, they hadn't experienced the pain. But the elderly lady beside me was secretly shedding a tear. She'd known the horror of wartime and suffered the noise and the fear. Perhaps she remembered a loved one who went away not to return. And looking around the world today, she wondered why they never learned. I was too young to know what had happened when the Second World War was declared. Just 18 months old, a mere toddler. I hadn't yet learned the word scared. I didn't notice the shortage of food. I barely remembered my dad. I suppose it's quite true that you really don't miss the things that you've never had. But the sacrifice Mother had to make to ensure that her family thrived, I knew nothing about till long after. Then I marvelled at how she'd survived. I was 8 when it finally ended and Dad arrived home at last and started to rebuild our lives again and tried to forget what had passed. As a family, we had been lucky, for none of our loved ones were lost. But I remember the tears in my mother's eyes when they talked of the terrible cost. My image of war was fashioned by films and by books that I read. I read of our glorious exploits and revelled in enemy dead. I saw the dam busters and cheered with the rest as the water gushed out in full flow. I didn't think of the thousands who drowned in the stricken valleys below. When I played, if it wasn't Red Indians, it was dastardly Germans I shot. And like in the films, they died cleanly. Seemed not to help them a lot. In real life, of course, it's not like that. They don't die without any pain. As a shell rips a limb off or bullets tear through, they cry out again and again and lie in the mud for hours on end with no one to render first aid till death puts an end to their suffering and another poppy is made. The voice on the tannoy says, "Thank you," and the hubbub resumes once more. For life must go on for the living and the tills have to roll for the store. We have made our annual gesture, and I wonder just how much it's achieved. I fear, for the planet in general, the message is still not perceived. For during that 2-minute silence, the tide will not have been turned. Many more have been killed the world over, and all because man will not learn. Thank you very much.